Okay, welcome everybody. My name's Jackie Boyle and I'd like to welcome you onto today's call with Dr. Ken Pepperdine and Dr. Ron Boasema Senior. And we've got a phenomenal topic today, which gives me goosebumps even when I think about it, because it's our future that we're talking about. And the topic is about our children and looking at their futures in regards to their health and what we can do to benefit them in regards to utilising Amulin and Climax into their daily routine and just their general health in overall as to how we can assist them. So that's what Ken and Ron are going to be talking about today. So without further ado, I just want to welcome everybody on board and thank you. And I also want to thank everybody that is going to listen to this after this call. So I hope you get some benefit from it and give us some feedback. That would be really wonderful. But I will hand it over to you and Ken and Ron. And thank you.
Do you want to do rock, paper, scissors, Ron? You start. I was.
Ken and I always have a good time when we talk, so we might go way over the time allotted, so hang in there. But I guess being the senior in the group of the two of us anyway, I've lived a lot longer years in this life raising children and grandchildren, and now seeing 6 great-grandchildren, so acutely aware of all the challenges that are out there and all the benefits. I mean, the benefits are you get to love on them, hug them, train them, teach them. Hopefully they learn to really do the right thing. And some do and some don't. But I think backing up to where I grew up, Western Michigan, my whole life, 75 years now, and eating food that came from the farm. And pretty much not out of the grocery stores. We had our own garden every year. I used to help Dad take the horse manure because he couldn't afford cow manure and spade that over into the garden. So that was always good fertilizer, or as best we could do, to really help keep the soil producing the crops that we could eat our own fresh or canned, as Mother would do. We didn't really freeze in those days because there wasn't a lot of freezer stuff, but today there's more of that. But the canning, then we had a fruit cellar, a vegetable cellar, and we had lots and lots of good stuff out of the garden that had nutrient value. Well, fast forward 70 years or whatever, 75 years, we're now living in an era where the grocery store is the place where most people buy their food. And unfortunately, most of what's in the grocery store shouldn't even be classified as food. Because when I say food, it's something that God created. It was grown in the ground. It hasn't been altered other than maybe different varieties of potatoes and tomatoes and that type of thing. But it was kinds of vegetables and fruits. What we see in the grocery stores today, filling the boxes and cans and frozen food stuffs, are things that are chemically made for the most part in laboratories that have a resemblance of food but almost no nutritional value. So that's putting us all at a big risk. I grew up eating those good healthy foods, so for me it was good to get a good start, and my parents even better start, unless there was some genetic things, and I had that occur in my mother's side, and that kind of related back to food in a way too. But there was those genetic weaknesses that were passed down. But we don't need to have those genetic weaknesses that we have passed down if we take in the right nutrients to prevent the cells from being acting not the way they should. Let's put it that way. So I feel very fortunate. I had the good foundation, and my peers above me, my parents and my brother-in-laws and all those people who are older than I am, we started out with a better foundation. Today, kids are being bombarded with all the wrong things, from lack of exercise. I can remember just talking to Donna today. We used to go out and we'd ride our bikes. We'd take off in the morning in the summertime. probably about 8 or 9 in the morning with a sack lunch, and we'd be gone until 5, 6 o'clock at night when we had to be home for supper. And but we had playtime. We were out riding our bikes, probably rode our bikes 15 miles to a woods to go swing at a bag swing and climb sand dunes all day. And you know what would happen in those days, the bikes weren't as good as they are today, and the chain would come off. So there sits one kid with the chain off, and you got another two holding them, pulling them down the road, you know, making them, allowing them to get back home again. But those were the times that were good, I think. Today, what I see in my part-time job working for a daycare, an after-school daycare program, is kids sitting on smartphones, and I almost don't like to use the word smartphone because I think it's doing a whole lot of damage to our kids today that we won't realize maybe quicker than we think. But the riding the bikes, the playing out in the yard, to play horseshoes, to go play football, to play soccer, to play baseball, jump rope, that's something Donna and I used to do all the time as kids too. You almost never see kids jumping rope today. And why would that be good? Well, number one, it's going to help the lymphatic system, which they really didn't know a whole lot about when I was a kid growing up, because when I was a kid, I had inflamed tonsils when I was 5 years old and younger. So the doctor's whole theory there was, well, they're inflamed. That's not good. Let's rip them out. And like there was a doctor, I forget his name now. He's since passed on, but he wrote many, many childhood books. But he says God only made one mistake when he was making the body. He put the tonsils way too close to the surgeon's knife. So they were easy to get at and pull out. What we know today, it's part of our lymphatic system, as is the appendix, which is another thing that gets pulled out so quickly in our culture today. So we're missing a lot of the things that were common sense and ordinary back 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago and before that even. And, you know, we've got to change it up. And that'll give our kids a lot better opportunity, because what I see them eating when they get back to the daycare after being in school all day is a bowl of Cheerios with milk on it. Well, the milk is full of bovine growth hormone and antibiotics. The Cheerios are full of glyphosate, which I could spend hours just talking about that alone. But I'm going to shut up for a little bit and let Ken interact here and continue this discussion.
I guess I'm the other bookend. I'm not a parent. I won't go into the reasons. But we see a lot of kids in the office. In fact, my associate's a pediatric chiropractor, studied in Australia, and a brilliant guy. And the changes I see in children in that office every day are phenomenal. But one of the most prominent things that comes about is it begins with a kind of an assumption. And often we'll get parents who come in and they say, well, my kids shouldn't need care. And the assumption is they're brand new. They're like a new car, a new toaster, a new vacuum cleaner. They shouldn't need anything. When in fact they are at one of the most vulnerable parts of their lives. They've been conceived and born, sometimes with trauma. And they do need care, and they need care and attention, both from parents and other helpers. One of the first things that I would talk about is preconception. And by that I mean preconception. And that is epigenetics. So the sperm of the father and the egg of the mother is somewhat variable genetically due to their environment. That is epigenetics. The environment will change the expression of your DNA. And so the environment has a huge, of the parent, even before conception, has a huge effect on the child. It's early days in that field, and we're going to know more about it as time goes on, but it's got to do with something called the methylation of the genes. As well, of course, we know that low folate and B12 levels lead to spinal cord defects and other problems. I happen to know a product that is high in those. It's blue. We call it Climax. Some of the studies show that high stress in the male before conception leads to lower learning ability in the offspring. High female stress. There was a study done of kids that were conceived after 9/11 in women who had been at the site, and they were very, very sensitive to noise. Smoking in males leads to earlier cardiovascular disease in their offspring. There's some studies after World War II, the starvation in Holland. Those mothers, their offspring were much more prone to diabetes and heart disease. There's a gene called the, what is it, FKBP5, which is altered in parents that have high stress. The thing about this is that it may be carried forward for up to 4 generations. So the stress in someone 4 generations ago may be visited on your offspring. So that's just how complex that is. So, and then we haven't gotten into current problems, the epigenetic effects of marijuana, nicotine, opioids, cocaine. I just saw a statistic or heard a statistic today that in the US, more people die annually of opioids now than died in Vietnam through the whole war. And we are so numb to drugs that that statistic just goes over people's heads. So infancy through teens is a really busy time. And you're growing a body with raw materials. Ron talked about that, the raw materials that he was given. We give the kids the raw materials to grow that body, to grow the immune system, to grow a gut biome, which is hugely important. And we now know that the baby gets the beginnings of their gut biome through the mother's saliva. And so a healthy mother is going to give those bacteria to the baby and help the baby. So it's not like being made by a factory. You want to pick up after that, Ron?
Yeah, another thing I would add to that too, when I was a kid, we had a few vaccinations early on in life, but the statistics today, I just pulled one off Facebook the other day, in 1993, and I don't know what the length of time, whether it's the first year of life or whatever, but there were 10 vaccines given. In 2000, that was in 1993. In 2013, it was 32 vaccines. In 2018, 74 vaccines. Well, and then they looked at the rate of autism. 1998, 1 in 10,000. 2013, 1 in 88. 2018, 1 in 36, and 1 in 28 with boys. So why is that occurring? Well, they're bombarded in that first year to 15 months with enormous amount of toxic material, from glyphosate is one of them, mercury, fluoride, we're seeing aluminum in those things. We're seeing so many toxic chemicals that are put into these babies, and you mix mercury and aluminum together. There's a video I watched today. It is downright frightening what it does in terms of how it manifests within the body. And we're expecting kids then to fight off things. And it's really kind of interesting. You know, they tell you that, you know, you got to have your vaccines, and you can't go to school, you can't begin kindergarten unless you've got all your vaccines. Well, they're so afraid that if someone comes in from the outside and they're not vaccinated, they could really affect the people in the schools that are all vaccinated. That vaccines are supposed to be protecting these people from all these problems. Then I guess they're not effective because they're worried about kids that aren't vaccinated coming into the school, affecting kids that are vaccinated. That doesn't make sense at all. So that's an interesting thing, I think. I watched a short video today too, and you can find this lady on the web. Doctors Stephanie Sneff, Seneff. Maybe I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but she does a lot of good work in terms of vaccinations and what some problems are. And I can put a link up in the site too to her work. But she was talking about MMRs, mumps, measles, and rubella, and how the glyphosate in that has affected the gut biome to create the leaky gut, to open that up to let toxic chemicals go into the blood-brain barrier. And fluoride, for instance, fluoride is a neurotoxin. So why do we have all these neurological conditions going on in the body today that we didn't see years ago? I mean, we see things going on in huge numbers in the schools today, kids with these issues, whether it's ADD, ADHD, autism, this rage that's going on. Kids can't focus. I pick up 5, 6 little kids that are 4th grade and under and drive them about 2 miles back from the school to the daycare. And that can be hell on earth because they're all pent up, wired up, and all kinds of crazy stuff. They always come out and they get treats if they do something good. So they're feeding their bodies full of sugar on top of all of that, causing a little bit more inflammation to just cause this weakness. And then we're bombarded with cell phones, the radiation coming from that. That's with only 4G. Can you imagine what we're going to experience when they go over to 5G? We're literally burning ourselves up from the inside out. And you talk, Ken, about the sperm rates, and not so many couples, and I used to counsel with them, they weren't able to conceive. Hormonally, that was a big deal back when I was in practice working really hard 20 years ago. But I think today, a big part of that is the radiation. Where do they carry their cell phones? In their pockets, close to their genitals. They're frying their ovaries and the testes. This is not a good thing. It's not going to get a whole lot better. But how do we prevent is what we're trying to, we're talking a lot of negative stuff, what's occurring. We've got 2 great products that can help mitigate quite a bit of it, but not all of it. It's not just take something good like what we have with Climax and with Emulin, but it's also avoiding the other things where we can and doing the things like exercise, being outdoors. Boy, the kids aren't doing that today. They're sitting indoors, playing around on their cell phones all day. So enough said. Back to you, Ken.
Thank you. Well, I thought one of the most prominent, just one comment, you were talking about autism. There's also a good epidemiological study that never went anywhere, but it linked the increased rates in autism to increased rates of Tylenol usage in children. And they showed that there was 2 periods in the US where autism rates briefly dropped, and that was concurrent with the tampering scares in Tylenol. And then there was a sudden spike in autism in male children, and that was concurrent with the pediatricians recommending Tylenol pre and post circumcision.
And vaccinations.
And vaccination, yeah. So, and to my knowledge, nobody ever followed up on it. Now, it's not, what is the word? Concurrence doesn't mean cause, but it's darn suspicious. But where's the money going to come to research that? Certainly not from the pharmaceutical companies, and that's a big research project. So it's a bit scary because we're going down the rabbit hole a ways. Anyway, what I ask myself is, what are the main challenges for kids these days? Well, it's ADD, ADHD, autism, asthma, overweight, future diabetes and cerebrovascular disease. And which of those would Climax and Emulin be beneficial for? All of them. All of them. ADD, ADHD, there's already studies on Climax. Autism, I believe there's some work on that. We know if we keep their inflammation levels lower, that a lot of these things will go down. Asthma for sure. Overweight and diabetes among children, if they didn't crave sweets as much, if they had higher dopamine levels and phenylethylamine levels from the climax, they'd be a lot more settled, a lot happier, a lot less agitated. So we can see right there that those two products together are going to have an effect on children just like they have on us. Although one thing that we've noticed in the office is that kids are, and I'm sure any parent knows that, kids really respond. You give them the right thing, they really, really respond quickly. And so that would be the proof in the pudding. And then I asked myself, well, what do children need? What's important for children? Well, they need healthy, active parents, for sure, because that sets the stage. They need vitamin L in large doses. That's love. Without that, they don't flourish. There was a study of the children in, I believe it was Romania, a lot of orphans. And they had good nutrition, they had good environment, but no personal care, no personal love. And those kids did not flourish. So kids need a lot of love. And that love isn't putting your kid in front of a device or a television. Those are really important things. They need exercise, as Ron said. They need good food, as Ron said. They need clean water. They need rest. They need a secure environment. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like the bottom level of that health pyramid? That's what we all need. So that's the basis for health. And that stuff is choice. It's not, you're not going to spend the farm on that. It's just choices. You want to carry on after that, Ron?
I got a question for you before you venture into this a little bit further, because I just want to clarify this, because if I may say to both of you, it's a really touchy subject when we're bringing up vaccines. And, you know, I personally can agree with what both of you are saying, because you can see the benefits in being old enough over the other side of 50 now that you do see what it was like for your grandparents and your own parents as well, and then for yourself growing up in that era too, that everything was natural. It wasn't pumped up with something to get an extended shelf life. We were kicked outside of the door to get outside, and I mean, I was happy to get outside, and I was gone for the day on my horses and didn't come back until dark. And we didn't have any phones, so your parents couldn't check up on you, so life was it was wonderful. It was really amazing. But when I look at this, like the diseases that are affecting our children, it's coming through from genetics from generations, but how do we can let people listen to this, but how do you actually try, and unless you're a doctor and you've got a doctor in front of you, or you've got a really decent medical background, and even then, try to explain to a mother or a young parent not to vaccinate their child, how do we do that crossover to try and explain to them these are the benefits? Like, what do we provide to them to try and get them to see the light and to encourage them to utilize these products, because of what the damage is, what is occurring from primarily vaccines and genetics as well, from my understanding.
I'll interject something, because you'll notice I didn't mention anything about vaccines. I'm still currently licensed, and my license prohibits me from talking about them. Our profession have chosen to limit our discussion of that, and that's why I haven't mentioned anything. When I get asked about that, I recommend that parents do their research and they invest some time looking into it, and both listen to their physician, the pros and the cons, and make their own decision. Now, Ron can say other things I can't.
Well, I would agree 100%. We need to educate the parents. That's really where the bottom line. Kids aren't going to make their own decisions whether they're going to do that when they're 2 days out of the womb or a couple minutes out of the womb. The parents have to be informed. And there's so much we can do on the internet today in so many areas and so many different points of view. And you got to make your own decisions how you raise your children. You know, you can choose not to give them bad food. You know, I was sitting at breakfast, Ken reminded me of this in his discussion about the kids are on the devices at a very young age. There was a couple with a child, and the child was probably under 2, sitting in a little high chair in a restaurant in front of a little notebook or whatever, an electronic one, eating breakfast. Well, the grandparents were playing on their smartphones, showing each other pictures the whole time they were eating. And his meal started out, he's a big guy, probably a weightlifter, but his meal started out with a great big Cinnabon that's probably 8 inches in diameter and 6 inches high. He ate that whole thing. His wife got a bite. He followed that up with a great big layered waffle with some gooey stuff in the middle, and then proceeded to go to 4 pancakes. You talk about a carb load. I mean, there's a man that's going to be winding up with some serious problems if he doesn't already have silent inflammation. He's going to have some problems. And the child didn't eat anything the whole time and had his face literally about 4 inches from the screen for the hour that they were in the restaurant. So that's what they're being bombarded with. Now, the grandparents are not well informed about what the kid's doing or what they were feeding that child. I don't know where the parents were, but I think our biggest role as adults who now have these 2 incredible products and more coming down the pike to inform people to become informed themselves. And that's probably Ken's biggest and my biggest frustration is how do you get the parents to, or anybody, to just inform themselves, whether it's people my age. They go out and get their flu shots all the time, and it's a crapshoot. You know, they're looking, and I just read something about China. Like last fall in China, they're looking for what they're going to have in the U.S. in terms of what's in the flu vaccine this year. And whether they get the right combination or not, who knows? So when I go to my medical doctor, and I do that once a year because you kind of got to do that, you know, he looks at me and says, well, you're pretty healthy. Looks like what you're doing is pretty good, but I really recommend that you have the flu shot, the pneumonia shot, the shingles shot, the tetanus shot, and all the shots. And I said, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you. Okay, see you next year, same time. Yep, that works out good. So, but he knows, you know, I can tell in his heart of hearts, he knows what I'm saying has fact. He can look at the evidence. And when I look around the waiting room of the people going in to see him, most of them don't look as youthful, as fit, physically, size-wise, or as healthy as what I do. So then it's going back to why not? And we had that discussion a couple of months ago. Why? So, but it's information. We need the information to get out to people. They can make up their own mind. If they choose to go that vaccination route, great. That's their decision. And then the consequences are theirs as well. My consequences are different. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
One of the things that I might advise, and it just occurred to me, is it's an oft-said thing, follow the money. Who's making a lot of money on what? And the things that you see most advertised on the media are the most profitable things. And of course, there's a lot of spin on those profitable things. And there's a lot of, we know that the FDA has a revolving door between the FDA, the people that work there, and lobbyists in Washington. And so somebody will be an administrator for the FDA for a few years, and then they'll get a paid lobby thing in Washington. And it'll go back and forth, highly paid jobs to try to promote various products. On the contrary, I just went to a farmer's market the other day, and they can't afford to advertise carrots or homegrown eggs or some wonderful cod cakes. Anyway, follow the money and look at the money trail, look at the lawsuits. I always, if I'm searching and trying to learn about something, I'll type in problems with and see what comes up, just to try to get a rounded vision of whatever. And they may be right in some cases. I need to make my own decisions because I'm becoming a little bit more suspicious and a little bit more cautious about some of these highly valued products.
Yeah, and you want to know where's the research coming from, who's doing the research, who's doing the testing, and I think a lot of that doesn't happen. We can be led down some false trails as well. So you got to dig deep, and that's not an easy chore. I mean, I look through a lot of sites and I see a lot of things, and then based on the training I have and how the body functions, I can make an intelligent decision. Now, not everybody's going to have the training that Ken or I have, or a lot of other people in the Galen family. But we need to educate ourselves enough to know that we need real food, we need clean air, we need clean water, we need exercise. Those are some just real basic things. And then we need to supplement to that, because the foods today aren't grown the way they were back 100 years ago when everything was organic. So, it's just it's a catch-22. One of the things that, the lymphatic system, that wasn't really discovered until well after I was in my teens or even beyond that. But, we used to jump rope, and I mentioned that earlier. Well, that pumps the lymphatic system. Now, my heart beating in my body right now as I'm sitting here, I don't have to do anything to make my heart run. Now, it can make it run better if I walk frequently and exercise it like any muscle, whether it's the biceps or, whatever. But the lymphatic system, you've got to move to pump the lymph. So, and we're not seeing young kids or adults or almost anybody doing adequate exercise. And I always encourage people, when I see them running or jogging or bicycling or moving, just being active. And we need to do that. Be active, be informed, and we can have a good, healthy life, and we can help prevent a lot of things from coming down the road.
So with regard to amylin in children, I think it's important to remember that children are naturally drawn to sweet and fat. Mother's milk is sweet, and there's a lot of good fats in it. And that's a natural thing. And that craving doesn't begin to moderate until around puberty. So it's a natural thing for children to be drawn to sweets. We have to control that. In primitive times, sweets were something that happened rarely when fruits came into, when trees fruited, or if somebody was lucky enough to get honey somewhere. I deal with a lot of First Nations people, Native people here, and I've had a couple of chats over the last week or two with them and saying, what's sweet in your world? And in your 300 years ago, what did you have that was sweet? Occasionally honey, occasionally berries. That's it. Now we have 24/7 availability and added sugar to so many products simply because it pushes that button in the brain, that satisfaction button, as does fat. And so I think it's almost mandatory to have, had I had children, or if I had children, I would have them on amylin right now because they're just bathed in sugar 12 months a year, where we were not designed for that at all. And so, and of course, that's why the high rate of obesity we're looking at now, diabetes happening in younger and younger kids, cardiovascular disease in younger and younger kids, signs of it. And we know the reason. And it should be up to parents to try to limit that. And again, follow the money. What's the most profitable product? Sugar Pops, Fruit Loops. So, that's one thing. Thinking about Climax, of course, anything with behavioral problems, Climax is, I'm still trying to be able to describe it to myself. To me, it seems like a Swiss Army knife. It does so much. And I don't think even Dr. Scolio knows yet the interaction of all the components of Climax, because there's so many synergistic factors between the great B12, those hormonal things, the stem cell triggering, the trace minerals. So, and I'm looking for the word, anyway, the colored things.
Bioflavonoids.
Yeah, flavonoids and there's another word, but anyway, they all interact. And so just like with medication, for instance, when they make a drug, they try to isolate what the active molecule is. And to me, Climax is just about the opposite. It's a bunch of active molecules that work in synergy and produce effects that have surprised us all. And so certainly for kids, they need antioxidants, and especially if they're active, because they have a high level of oxidative stress, oxidation, if they're running and jumping and all of that stuff, and they need to quench the free radicals. Otherwise, it can do tissue damage. And of course, Ron mentioned the depleted soils and how that affects things. Certainly, we're not getting the trace minerals. Vaccination was talked about, but a healthy immune system is very, very important. And we know that Climax is very good for the immune system. So, and one thing I discovered about it, I don't know if people are familiar with kefir, which is like a runny yogurt. You put Climax in kefir, and you can see that it turns a beautiful blue. And I don't think there's a kid on the planet that wouldn't eat that. It tastes wonderful. And they'd be crying for their blue stuff. Can I have my blue stuff today? And so that's one very good nutritional thing that is not hard to give. Ron?
You know, Ken, it's interesting as you're saying that what Climax will do, and we don't, and Dr. Stefano doesn't either know the real big benefit, ultimately, what it can do and all the potential that it has for all of us. And it does, and we're seeing that in our Facebook pages of what it is doing to people with conditions that are challenged. Can you imagine what it'll do to people who have less challenge? If we're eating the healthy diet, if we're not putting in all the sugars and all the toxins and poisons in our atmosphere, and what it could do, how we could live, it would just be amazing. I mean, I can't hardly imagine. But we're so bombarded. You know, parents are stressed out and they're busy, so to learn about what we're talking about is difficult. We went shopping today, and we walked into the major supermarket here. And, of course, it's Labor Day weekend coming up in the United States this coming Monday. So all the shelves or the aisles that are big wide, they're just chock full of Doritos and all those snacky foods, all kinds of beer, all kinds of wine, all of the stuff that causes a lot of the problems, I should say, of what we're talking about. The bombardment, and the kids are eating that. And going back to something you said a bit ago, too, about, you know, back in the day, in ancient days when I was a kid, I was thinking about that. We didn't eat fruits and vegetables in the wintertime because you couldn't get them. You know, now with modern shipping that we have, that goes really around the world, in an instant you can get stuff from South America, and you're having all these wonderful things. And we got a nice picture of someone's ear there. So anyway, but what we're getting is all these fruit juices in our kids today. Rather than eating the fruit like I used to get when it was in season, couldn't wait for fall when you could get a good apple or a wonderful peach or a plum or blueberries for just about 4 or 5 weeks, and you can put that on your yogurt or ice cream or whatever back in that day. But we had all those good good fruits. Well, today we go to the grocery store and you get it concentrated, and it's from concentrate, and it's not even real fruit a lot of times. And we're being bombarded with it without the fiber to slow down that process of insulin in the pancreas. So it's just a big hit right away. And we have these horrible swings in our blood sugar, which is going to be a big, big problem down the road, whether it's diabetes or whether it's type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's. So we got all that coming if we don't make modifications, and it's up to us. We need to be the bold voices to speak out.
You reminded me something of Ron, back in the Paleolithic days when you were a kid.
Yes.
what people did, you didn't have those foods so easily available at the grocery store, so people stored things away, and they fermented things. And so all those fermented foods are so good for the gut biome. And you don't see much of that today. And so that's another thing. I had a native person here talking to me about what they call grease. And that is fermented, rotted candlefish. And they eat that with seaweed. And this woman said, I just feel so good when I eat that. And if you ever smelled it, I don't know how you get it. It's, I don't know how you get it near your nose, but we're designed to eat those things, right? And to help our gut biome, but it's not happening. Well, it's beginning to happen.
Back in the paleo days, I used to have a lot of sauerkraut.
Yeah.
Because it was cheap. Well, and tonight, for my dinner tonight, we had fried cabbage, and we took the cabbage and Donna cut it up. I say we, it's Donna. So, and she's a great cook. She spends a lot of time in the kitchen. It's literally 3 meals a day, 6 and 2/3 days a week that we're eating at home. One day, breakfast out on Saturdays, but it's done in coconut oil. And then we had sweet potato. And then we had some grass-fed beef with some hot salsa on top of it, rather than a ketchup kind of, just not a bun, just beef. A good, clean, healthy diet, which feeds my body the right raw materials. And then afterwards, I had some homemade organic yogurt with some blueberries and some peaches and, some organic coffee. So, if we do those right things, the body can flourish. But we got to teach the people. And boy, I'm trying to find a platform where I can go to the parents of the kids that I pick up at the daycare and inform these parents somehow. And I don't know how to do it. And it's frustrating because I see their actions when they get out and they got a blue tongue, not because of Climax, but because of a sucker that they were given in school for achieving something. So they're poisoning these kids and not knowing it. That's the sad part.
Sorry, Ken, I just want to say something to you both is just one word, intervention. Like if we could try and find that intervention, and whilst I'm sitting here and we all know what McDonald's is, we're just the intervention of trying to stop multi-level marketing, and whether it be McDonald's or KFC or whatever it may be, that's sent through on an email. They've got access to our children through their parents. And, here we are, we know what is right, but this is what we're confronted with. And how do you go into a supermarket? It's intervention preparation. I take my granddaughter into the supermarket and I take food with me before I go in there because she's wanting a Kinder Surprise. And the first couple of times was not such a good outcome for her, but because she didn't get it. But it's taking food in there with you because that's just what they're conditioned to. So it's that intervention on trying to get people to put the preparation in so that they're not caught up in the marketing and the ease and convenience, and then also the cost, because junk food actually is probably cheaper than what good food is. Though they're making it more economically enticing for parents that are on a low income, that this is what we're struggling against. And then we want them to try and take these supplements because we know that they're really beneficial for our children. But this is what we're up against, that intervention. It's tough. This call's going to be phenomenal for people.
One of the real challenges is with those foods is that they push the happy button. And they're absolutely scientifically designed to be very satisfying, but not very lasting. So it puts you on that roller coaster where you crave more. And they know that, the producers of those foods. One of the things I was going to say about kids is, and it's both a sad and happy thing, is that infants are pure potential. They have the potential to become amazing, absolutely amazing, better than us. And that potential gets sacrificed bit by bit, like grains of sand. And that's what is a heartbreaker. There's an old story about a stonemason who is disciplining his son. And his son says, "But Dad, you don't do those things." And Dad said, "Well, come out into the backyard." And he showed the son a statue that was almost done, a marble statue. And he said, "That's like me. I've already been formed and I can't change it easily." And then he showed him a block of uncarved granite and said, "That's like you. You can be anything." And that's what children are. And I think we owe it to them, and certainly it's going to be a hard future for them. It's an uphill battle. I know in my own case, I'm a chiropractor because of care I did not have when I was a kid, and developed an anomalous vertebrae in my spine that's been troubled. Nobody told me I'd be bending over people for 40 years with a bad back. They took my money. But anyway, we have to see kids as something of great value, and we have to make them happy different ways other than through their taste buds. I don't know in Australia, but Dairy Queen has an ad with a great big smiley mouth and big lips and a tongue, and they talk about happy all the time. It's happy, happy, happy. And they don't mention that 30 or 40 years down the road it'll be sad. It's a little like borrowing money on the credit card. You get the fun today, but you get the bill. In this case, in the case of food and some of these other things, you get the bill 40 years later. Mm-hmm. And it's accumulated interest and hard to pay back. Impossible.
Could I just interject here? I have to leave early tonight, unfortunately, but I just wanted to say how much I've enjoyed this call. You brought up some really good points, and I think our target is the younger mums, as you were mentioning, Ron, about that's what kids learn, is how the other generations are doing things. And you see mums that are all together and they're all doing the same thing, so they think it's okay because they're all doing it. And so that makes it okay. The other thing that you alluded to, Ken, was the impact even generationally. I see that in my work. I see the energetic components of things that people are trapping from their parents and genetically inherited from many generations back. And so there's an energetic component there too, that, you know, they're born carrying that without any fault of their own. And so whatever we can do, you know, to do all those physical things, and if you have the opportunity to look at emotion release, that does open up a whole lot of the pathways that help these kids be able to metabolize the food that they're supposed to be eating. So just wanted to say a quick thank you and goodbye, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, Debbie.
Good night. Yeah, one of the things too I wanted to bring up while I'm thinking about it too, and we talk about the gut biome and what's happening with all the foods today. I've seen statistics that 75% or more of our food contains Roundup, and there was just a big in the States here a lawsuit of $282 million awarded to a man in California who worked for a school district in the lawn care, taking care of lawns, who developed cancer from the Roundup, which contains the glyphosate. And what glyphosate does in the gut, it opens up the gut to cause leaky gut, and things will then easily pass through the blood-brain barrier. But it also strips out sulfur from the diet. And here's my challenge to all of you. I'm not going to tell you. I want you to do what I'm telling the parents to do. Do your own research, but look up deficiencies in sulfur and what foods contain sulfur. And I know that most kids are sulfur deficient. They're not getting it because I'll just read you a partial list. Asparagus, avocados, well, that's a pretty easy one. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, celery, hickory, onions, potatoes, radishes, just to name a few of the common things that contain sulfur. We need to have those in our diet. If we don't, we're in trouble. We can't live without sulfur in the body. So do a little research on what sulfur deficiencies can cause, and you'll know what's happening in our culture with our kids today and our adults as well.
We don't get in our diet, so then we have to supplement back with it. And if we have joint troubles, we take methylsulfonylmethane, sulfonylmethane.
Yep.
We take chondroitin sulfate. We take glucosamine sulfate. Those are all things that are high in sulfur and good for joint health, but they're good for your health overall. And in fact, I believe it's glucosamine. They've just found some new things that it does, maybe in cancer prevention and other things.
The neurological benefits too for sulfur, for the brain.
Yeah.
Huge, huge.
So, and again, I haven't memorized what's in Climax, but I do believe it's got a fairly high sulfur content. You can smell it a little bit when you eat it. And so there you go. And that's one of those primordial foods that was there long before humans. And it's one of the founder of our profession spoke of a term called innate, and that's innate intelligence. Our bodies have innate intelligence, and that is the intelligence of the universe that we were derived out of. And if we operate in accordance with that, we tend to be healthy. If we fight it, if we get clever, we get sick.
Yeah, I think today what's happening is we're having man think they're much wiser, and they're genetically modifying the foods to improve them. Well, that's not going to work.
Both of you, like I'm just looking at the time frame here, but I do want to say something for all of us in the Galen family. Stay tuned and plugged into the New Millennium mums that we do have on board, because they're really active on social media and what they're doing with their children and the benefits that their children are getting from Emulin and Climax. And we've had them on, we've interviewed a few of them on here, and it's just that within itself is probably one of the best testimonials that you can get, is to get young parents with young children that are utilizing a healthy lifestyle and including the supplements into their families' lives, and they're getting the benefits from it. So with what both of you have been discussing today, it just, it's alarming. It nearly makes you want to cry because there's so much that you want to do, but you're very limited because of how it's going to be received from a parent or parents or grandparents. And that's what we're challenged against. That's what we're facing. But for us, we know that it works. But if I can encourage anybody to try and just plug into these mums that are using the products that we have within our Galen family, because the results are phenomenal when you watch them, when you listen to them. And the the Eye Wellness team, there's 6 mums that are in that team on the Facebook page, Eye Wellness team, and they're all practitioners. And they're putting so much information into there all the time. Their site's just a phenomenal site. We've got Ashley Week, we've got Britt and Ash as well. Like, they're always doing things as well that with their kids and putting it up on there, that they're proof of what these products can do. And they're also taking on the challenge of the big chain stores, and they're choosing to have the healthy lifestyle for their kids. And you can see the benefits in what's coming through from them. So I just want to put that in there because I think it's there. We just need to search it and use it more with what we're going to get from what Ken and Ron have said today. So as we wrap it up, is there anything that you both want to say on your final points on today's topic?
Well, just a comment on what you just said. Look for the bright spots and support the bright ones. We've got a lot of people coming into our office with kids just like you just described. Healthy, vital kids, active, calm, everything that you want a child to be. And the parents are really involved with those children. So those are the bright spots. We support them as much as we can, and they shine a light into those other families that aren't doing that, and they'll pull them ahead.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say too, I'm encouraged by my own lineage because they see a grandfather, a father, a grandfather, and the great ones are too young to know yet because the oldest one is not quite 8. But what I'm seeing in my grandchildren especially is their awareness of the health of their grandparents compared to their peers, parents and grandparents. And I've got a granddaughter, one in particular, who is doing the right things. In fact, I see posts on her Facebook page of her little daughter who is just over a year now with her face planted in an avocado and loving it. And you know, then I think, okay, I have made a difference because it's passing down from one generation to the next. And she is inquiring about, Grandma, how do you do this? How do you do that? We want your recipe for this. It's the best we've ever had. So we're seeing it. It's just frustrating that it's not blowing up like a mushroom and getting a lot larger, a lot quicker for more people. And other than that, boy, it's good.
Look, I'm not sure if anyone's got any questions, but we do need to wrap it up. But what I do want to say to both of you, I was so excited when you gave us the topic for today, and it's just been absolutely phenomenal. It's invaluable, the knowledge that you've brought forward to the table for us today to take away and think about. But more importantly, once this does go up on the page, please make sure that you share it. And we will try and touch base again, I believe, with children or even specifically into teenagers going into that older sector, because I think that's another area within itself when they're crossing over from their parents' influence and as to when they start to go out into the world, into the party life and that type of thing, as to how much that their health changes from having the influence of their parents to having their own choices. Sometimes it can be better, but most of the time it can be a really a downward slide for quite a few years because they're experiencing life and we see health problems step into it. So it would be I'm just putting a little planting seed in here for you two to look at the teenager as they head into adulthood, because that's another area that you see a big transition in health for kids as well. And suicide, mental health, things like that start to come through very dominantly in that time frame. So does anybody want to ask any questions before we do wrap it up today? No? That just means you guys are just amazing. Oh, no, we have. Loudon.
I just want to say thank you. It's been very informative, and I appreciate it very much. Let's spread the message.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure. We're here because we care.
Exactly.
And actually, yeah, it's just how do you not care? I'm polarized because I see business entities that don't care. All they care about is money. And I'm fighting that.
And you can see it through both of you, like you lead with your hearts. And I think that's with all of us here. It's a very unique position that we're in. And it's been a gift that we have in our hands. And I think that gift just, I've got goosebumps as I talk about it, but that gift goes into your heart because we know that we've got something really special. It's just a matter of how do we transfer this invaluable gift that we've been given to get others to see the light and to be able to see the value for the future for our children and our grandchildren and for ourselves as well. And we see it time over in testimonials. It's life-changing. And if we can intervene and hopefully this topic today and this conversation, it can be shared so people will be able to subtly give it to somebody as a parent and just to have a listen to this, that you're not sort of, trying to change their mind. They can just listen and mull over it themselves, and hopefully somebody might make that change and decide to help their children the way that we're doing for ourselves.
If I might say, for those who watch the video of this on YouTube, there's a comment section. And please give us suggestions, criticism. I don't know about Ron, but I need criticism. I need brutal feedback and suggestions for what else we can talk about, because I feel a bit like a broken record.
I like the word critique.
Yep. Okay.
Oh,
can I ask one question, clarification? When we got talking about how some of the egg and sperm, their expression can be as far back as 4 generations. And one of the things you said was methylation of genes. Is there a quick answer for what methylation is?
Yeah, I don't know it.
Okay.
I think it's an alteration of a methyl group alters the expression of a gene. So a methyl group is a chemical
Yep.
group.
And I think it's a byproduct, isn't it, Ken, of sugar?
Can be, I believe, also free radical activity, other things. And there are things that quench those free radicals that reduce methylation. A lot of the stuff in Clamex.
Okay, so what I want to do with both of you, we do need to wrap it up. So I want to thank both of you, both Ken and Ron, because you're always, as I said, invaluable to us. And it's evident how much by people that get on board, because we want to hear what you have to share with us, because it's an education and it's a lesson. And I want to thank Lee. Rafferty, did you want to say anything before we tidy up today?
No, thank you. The only observation I make is this entire topic of caring for our children and what they need, it's so simple, but people will excuse themselves on the basis that they're time poor. Things cost money. And I think it occurred to me while you were talking that we really need not only to pay attention to the issues that you've discussed this morning, but we need to start getting real about what's important in our lives, and managing our time to provide the time to our children as one example, and to care for them appropriately with good food. And there's no excuse. That was just the observation that came to me as I was listening to you talk. We need to really reevaluate our priorities. So thank you. It's great information to share.
Yeah, I think it's living by example is the one of the keys.
Yes.
Okay, so we are going to wrap it up this time. So we're going to finalise it, and we look forward to next month as we head into a new month. For us here in Australia, we're heading into the first month of spring, so that's pretty exciting for us. And you're heading into autumn over in that part of the world. I don't feel so happy for you in that side of things. So you're going into the cold side. But I do want to thank you again, and I have nothing but admiration and pure respect for both of you for what you bring to the table and into this space every single month. And if we could have you on every week, I'm sure all of us would be happy to do so, because it sends me away with so much to think about, but also so much to share as well that I couldn't put it into those words. So it's always nice to have a different voice. So thank you, Ken, and thank you, Ron, and thank you everybody for being on the call today.
Yes, we love new education.
Good night.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks, guys, very much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
You're welcome.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Or good morning, everyone.
Good